What happens when Jared Leto walks onto a live set like The View, and things don't go the way anyone expected? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The camera opens on the familiar panel. The hosts are mid-conversation, the energy light but already layered with that usual undercurrent of strong opinions. The audience is relaxed, some light laughter still trailing off. Then the introduction begins. All right, everyone, our next guest is an Academy Award-winning actor, musician, and, let's just say, a very interesting personality, one host says with a smile. Please welcome Jared Leto. The audience claps, some cheering louder than others. Jared walks out, dressed in his usual bold, slightly unconventional style. He smiles, waves, gives a quick nod to the panel, and sits down. Thanks for having me, he says calmly, crossing one leg over the other. Of course, another host replies. We've been wanting to talk to you for a while. The tone is polite, but there's already something slightly tense in the air. It's subtle, the kind of thing regular viewers might pick up on right away. Joy Behar leans forward slightly, looking at Jared with a half-smile that doesn't fully reach her eyes. So, Jared, she begins, you've had quite the career, acting, music, even these retreats you've been hosting. A few audience members chuckle softly. Jared smiles, clearly aware of where this might be going. Yeah, he says. It's been a journey. Joy tilts her head. A journey is one way to put it. Some people might call it unusual. There's a ripple in the audience, not quite laughter, more like curiosity. Jared doesn't react defensively. Instead, he leans back slightly. Unusual compared to what? Joy shrugs. Well, compared to reality for most people. A couple of the other hosts shift in their seats. One quickly jumps in, trying to keep things light. Well, creative people tend to live a little differently. But Joy continues, not letting the moment pass. I mean, you've been described as intense, even by your co-stars. The audience reacts again, this time louder. Some oohs can be heard. Jared lets out a small laugh. I've heard that before. And is it true? Joy presses. There's a slight pause. Jared looks directly at her now, his tone still calm, but more focused. I care about what I do, he says. If that's intense, then sure. Joy nods slowly, but there's a hint of skepticism. Caring is one thing. But there's a line, right? Some actors say you don't break character. That you stay in it, even when the cameras stop. The audience leans in. This is where things start to shift. Jared smiles again, but this time it's tighter. It depends on the role. So you admit it? Joy says quickly. Another host jumps in, slightly laughing. Joy, let him finish. But Joy isn't backing off. No, I'm just curious. Because there's dedication, and then there's making everyone else uncomfortable. A few audience members clap lightly, while others murmur. Jared straightens up a bit. I think that's a misunderstanding, he says. People like to tell stories, especially in this industry. Joy raises an eyebrow. So they're not true? I didn't say that, Jared replies. I said they're stories. That line lands. The audience reacts with a mix of laughter and surprise. One of the co-hosts leans in, smiling nervously. Okay, this is getting interesting. Joy folds her hands on the table. Well, let's talk about it honestly. Because when you're working with other people, it's not just about your process. It affects everyone. Jared nods. Absolutely. And I respect that. But do you? Joy asks, cutting in quickly. The tension spikes just a little higher. The audience goes quieter now, sensing the shift. Jared pauses before answering. Yes, he says simply. Joy leans back, unconvinced. Because from what we hear, not everyone feels that way. There's a noticeable reaction, a mix of gasps and murmurs. Another host tries to redirect. Let's talk about your new project. But Jared gently raises his hand, not aggressively, just enough to signal he wants to respond. No, it's okay, he says. I don't mind talking about this. The audience quiets even more. I think, Jared continues, there's this idea that if you don't do things the normal way, then something must be wrong. But art isn't normal. Joy immediately responds, but people are. And they have to work with you. A few claps from the audience. The energy is clearly split now. Jared nods again, slower this time. And I do work with people. Successfully, I might add. A couple of audience members cheer at that. Joy gives a small smile, but it's more sharp than friendly. Sure, but success doesn't excuse behavior. That line lands heavily. There's a brief silence, the kind that only happens on live TV when no one is quite sure who should speak next. Finally, one of the other hosts laughs lightly, trying to ease the tension. Okay, we are diving deep right now. The audience laughs, but it's slightly nervous. Jared glances at Joy, then back at the rest of the panel. I think there's a difference between perception and reality, he says. Joy responds immediately, and I think sometimes people hide behind that. The audience reacts again, louder this time. Jared's expression shifts just a bit. Still calm, but more serious now. Or, he says, sometimes people judge what they don't understand. That gets a strong reaction, applause mixed with a few wow reactions. Joy leans forward again, clearly not backing down. Oh, I understand plenty. And just like that, the tone of the conversation fully changes. What started as a typical guest interview is now something else entirely. The audience can feel it. The hosts can feel it. And Jared Leto and Joy Behar are no longer just exchanging polite questions and answers. They're challenging each other, directly in real time on live television. And this is only the beginning. The energy in the studio doesn't reset after that moment. It lingers. You can feel it in the way the audience quiets just a little faster than usual, in the way the hosts glance at each other, trying to decide whether to lean in or pull things back. Jared Leto shifts slightly in his seat, still composed, but now clearly more engaged. This isn't a routine interview anymore. And across the table, Joy Behar looks just as locked in. One of the co-hosts tries again to smooth things over. Okay, this is why live TV is always interesting, she says with a nervous laugh. But Jared, let's talk about your latest project, because that's really why you're here. Jared nods politely. Of course. You're starring in this new film, and you've said in interviews that it required you to really transform yourself again. Physically, emotionally, everything. Yeah, Jared replies. It was a challenging role. Joy jumps back in almost immediately. And by transform, do you mean disappearing into the role completely again? There's a slight groan from somewhere in the audience. Not loud, but noticeable. People can sense Joy isn't letting this go. Jared turns his head toward her. I mean, committing to the character, yes. But at what cost? Joy asks. Another host raises her hand slightly. Joy. No, I'm asking a fair question, Joy insists. Because audiences hear these stories, sending things to co-stars, staying in character off set, and it raises questions about boundaries. A few audience members clap. Others shift uncomfortably. Jared exhales softly through his nose, almost like he expected this. I think there's a lot of exaggeration, he says. People like to sensationalize things. Joy nods, but her expression says she's not convinced. So none of that happened? I didn't say none of it happened, Jared replies. I said it gets blown out of proportion. There's a murmur in the crowd again, that careful balance between intrigue and tension. Another host leans forward, trying to bridge the gap. I think what Joy is getting at is, where do you draw the line between dedication and, making your coworkers uncomfortable? Jared looks at her, appreciating the softer tone, but his answer doesn't change much. I draw the line at respect, he says. Always. Joy tilts her head again. But respect is subjective, isn't it? Jared's eyes narrow just slightly, not aggressively, but with focus. Not really. A few audience members react to that, some with small claps, others with quiet hum sounds. Joy leans in, her voice a bit firmer now. Because if someone says they felt uncomfortable, that's their reality. You don't get to define that for them. The tension sharpens. Jared nods slowly. And I would never try to define someone else's experience. Then do you take responsibility for it? Joy asks quickly. There's a beat. I take responsibility for my actions, Jared says. But I also think context matters. Joy lets out a small laugh, not amused, more skeptical. Context always matters when people are trying to explain something away. A few audience members react with a mix of laughter and, oh, reactions. One of the co-hosts jumps in again, clearly trying to balance things. Okay, let's pause for a second, because I think we're getting into a bigger conversation here, about acting, about process. But it is a bigger conversation, Joy says, cutting her off. Because this isn't just about one actor. It's about a culture in Hollywood that sometimes excuses behavior in the name of art. That line lands heavily with the audience. There's a louder round of applause now. Jared sits forward slightly, resting his hands together. His tone stays controlled, but there's more weight behind it now. I agree that no one should be excused for bad behavior, he says. Joy nods quickly. Good, but, Jared continues, I also think it's dangerous to label something as bad behavior without understanding it fully. The audience splits again, some applause, some hesitation. Joy shakes her head lightly. Or maybe it's dangerous to keep giving people the benefit of the doubt when others are speaking up. There's a sharper reaction now, a few louder claps, a few scattered cheers. Another host looks between them. This is getting very real. Jared glances briefly at the audience, then back at Joy. I'm not asking for the benefit of the doubt, he says. I'm asking for fairness. Joy responds instantly. And fairness includes listening to the people who felt affected. Jared nods. Absolutely. Then what do you say to them? Joy presses. That question hangs in the air. For the first time, Jared pauses longer than before. The studio is completely quiet now. I'd say, he begins carefully, that if anything I did made someone uncomfortable, that was never my intention. Joy raises an eyebrow. Intention isn't the same as impact. A louder reaction from the audience, some clapping, some audible agreement. Jared doesn't flinch this time. I understand that, he says. But intention still matters. Joy leans back slightly, crossing her arms. It matters, but it doesn't erase what happened. One of the other hosts nods, trying to mediate. I think both things can be true. The audience murmurs in agreement. Jared looks at her. Exactly. But Joy isn't letting the balance settle. Except one side often gets more protection than the other. Now the tension is undeniable. Jared's posture straightens. I don't feel particularly protected right now, he says. That line gets a strong reaction, laughter mixed with applause. Even one of the co-hosts laughs. Okay, that's fair. Joy smiles slightly, but it's still sharp. You're on a national show, getting to tell your side. That's a form of protection. Jared responds calmly. And I'm being questioned about it. That's not protection, that's conversation. The audience reacts again, this time louder, more divided. You can see the dynamic shifting. It's no longer just a host pressing a guest. It's a real back and forth, each point being met with another. Another host tries once more to redirect. Let's bring it back to the work for a second. But Joy shakes her head. No, because this is about the work. The way you work matters. Jared nods, but his tone is firmer now. And I stand by my work. Joy responds quickly. That's not what I asked. There's a collective ooh from the audience. Jared looks directly at her. I know. A brief silence follows, charged, uncomfortable, but impossible to look away from. Then one of the co-hosts exhales and says, half laughing, this might be one of the most intense conversations we've had in a while. The audience laughs, but it doesn't fully break the tension. Because at this point, it's clear. Neither Jared Leto nor Joy Behar is backing down. And the conversation is only getting deeper. The studio feels different now. Not louder, not chaotic, just heavier. The kind of quiet where every word lands harder, where even the audience seems unsure whether to react immediately or just listen. Jared Leto sits forward now, elbows resting lightly near the table, hands loosely together. Across from him, Joy Behar watches closely, her posture firm, clearly not finished. One of the co-hosts takes a breath and tries to step in again, her tone measured. Okay, I think what we're circling around here is accountability versus interpretation. And maybe there's a middle ground. Joy turns slightly toward her. There should be a middle ground, but too often there isn't. Jared responds before the moment drifts. Or maybe the middle ground gets ignored because it's not as interesting. There's a ripple in the audience, some soft laughter, some nodding. Joy looks back at him. You think this is about entertainment? I think a lot of narratives are shaped by what people want to hear, Jared says. Joy doesn't hesitate. Or by what people experience. That lands again, steady, direct. Another host leans in, trying to soften things. Let me ask you this, Jared. When you hear criticism like this, do you reflect on it? Or do you feel like it's just noise? Jared nods. I reflect. Of course I do. Joy interjects quickly. And what do you change? The audience reacts, a few claps, a few sounds. Jared glances at her, then answers carefully. I think about how I communicate, how I collaborate, but I don't abandon the way I approach my work entirely. Joy leans back slightly. So the core stays the same. Yes, Jared says simply. Joy gives a small, knowing smile. That's what people are reacting to. There's a pause, not awkward, but charged. Jared tilts his head. Or they're reacting to a version of it. Joy shakes her head lightly. You keep saying that, a version, a narrative. At some point, Doesn't it become easier to just accept that maybe the criticism is valid? A few audience members clap more loudly now. Jared's expression tightens, just a fraction. Criticism can be valid, he says. But it's not automatically correct just because it's loud. That line gets a strong reaction, a mix of applause and a few surprised laughs. One of the co-hosts raises her eyebrows. Okay, that's a statement. Joy doesn't miss a beat. And sometimes it's loud because people weren't being heard before. The audience responds immediately, louder applause, a few cheers. Jared nods, acknowledging the point. That's fair. There's a brief moment where it seems like things might level out, like they've found a sliver of agreement. But it doesn't last. Joy leans forward again. So let me ask you directly, she says. If multiple people say they felt uncomfortable working with you, do you believe them? The question lands hard. The audience goes completely still. Jared pauses, longer than before. You can see him choosing his words carefully now. I believe that they felt what they felt, he says. Joy's eyes narrow slightly. That's not the same as believing them. Jared meets her gaze. It is actually. Joy shakes her head. No, it's not. That's a very careful answer. A few audience members murmur in agreement. Jared exhales quietly. It's an honest answer. Another host quickly steps in, sensing the tension rising again. Okay, but let's talk about solutions then. Because this is clearly something that comes up around actors who use immersive methods. How do you make sure everyone feels comfortable on set? Jared turns slightly toward her, grateful for the shift, but he doesn't avoid the core of it. You communicate, he says. You check in. You listen. Joy cuts in again. And if someone says, this is too much? Then you adjust, Jared replies. Joy raises an eyebrow. Do you? There's a louder, ooh, from the audience. Jared doesn't smile this time. Yes. Joy leans in just a bit more. Can you give an example? Now the pressure is very clear. Jared pauses again, then shakes his head slightly. I'm not going to discuss specific people or situations on air. Joy sits back, almost like she expected that answer. Convenient. The audience reacts, a mix of laughter and tension. One of the co-hosts immediately jumps in. Or respectful. There's a small round of applause for that. Joy glances at her, then back at Jared. Respect goes both ways. Jared nods. Exactly. Joy's tone sharpens slightly. Then why does it sound like you're defending the process more than the people affected by it? That question hits harder than the others. The audience goes quiet again. Jared leans forward now, more directly engaged than at any point before. I'm not defending hurting anyone, he says. I'm defending the idea that there are different ways to create. Joy responds instantly. Not at the expense of others. Jared's voice stays calm but firmer. You're assuming that's what's happening. Joy doesn't back off. I'm listening to what people have said. Jared nods. And I'm telling you there's more to it. The two of them hold eye contact for a moment that feels longer than it is. One of the co-hosts lets out a small breath and says, half under her voice but still picked up, "This is intense." The audience laughs lightly, but it's brief. Because the focus doesn't shift. Joy folds her hands again. You know what this reminds me of, she says. Every time someone in a position of influence gets called out, there's always this layer of you don't understand the full story. Jared responds quietly. Sometimes that's true. Joy nods. And sometimes it's a way to avoid accountability. A few audience members clap again. Jared tilts his head slightly. And sometimes it's a way to avoid nuance. That line draws a strong reaction, applause, a few surprised laughs. Another host looks between them, almost amazed. You two are not letting each other go today. Joy smiles briefly. I'm just asking questions. Jared responds, and I'm answering them. Joy adds, carefully. Jared nods. Thoughtfully. That exchange gets a noticeable reaction, the audience picking up on the subtle edge in both tones. There's a pause. Then one of the co-hosts, trying once more to rebalance things, says, let's zoom out for a second. Because this conversation is bigger than one person. It's about how far is too far when it comes to art. Jared turns slightly toward her. Exactly. Joy adds, and who decides that? The audience murmurs again. Jared answers, ideally? The people involved. Joy shakes her head. But power dynamics exist. Not everyone gets an equal say. That shifts the energy again, deeper, more serious. Jared nods slowly. That's true. For a moment, there's a small opening, a shared acknowledgement. But even that doesn't fully ease the tension. because the underlying disagreement is still there. Joy leans forward one more time, her tone slightly quieter now, but more pointed. Do you think you've ever crossed a line? The question hangs there. The audience is completely silent. Jared doesn't answer immediately. And for the first time since this conversation began, it feels like the next words could change everything. The silence stretches just a little longer than anyone expects. You can feel the entire studio holding its breath. Jared Leto doesn't look away this time. He stays focused on Joy Behar, his expression steady, but there's a noticeable shift, less guarded, more direct. Finally, he speaks. I think anyone who's been doing something for as long as I have has probably crossed a line at some point, he says. The audience reacts immediately, a low murmur, a few surprised "oh" sounds. It's the most open answer he's given so far. Joy doesn't interrupt right away. She watches him, almost studying the response. Jared continues, but the difference is whether you learn from it or pretend it never happened. That lands. There's a wave of applause, not overwhelming, but strong and genuine. Joy nods slowly. Okay, she says. That's fair. For the first time in a while, her tone softens just slightly. One of the co-hosts exhales audibly. All right, we're getting somewhere. A few audience members laugh, the tension easing just a bit. But Joy isn't done. So what did you learn? She asks. The room tightens again, not as sharply as before, but enough to bring the focus right back. Jared nods, almost like he expected that follow-up. That communication matters more than intention, he says. That you can't assume everyone understands your process the way you do. The audience listens closely, quieter now, more attentive. And Joy presses gently. And that if something you're doing affects someone negatively, Jared continues, you have a responsibility to address it, not dismiss it. That gets a stronger reaction, applause, a few cheers. Joy leans back slightly, arms no longer crossed. That's a different answer than earlier. Jared gives a small smile. It's the same answer, just more complete. A light ripple of laughter moves through the audience. One of the co-hosts smiles. Growth on live TV, we love to see it. The audience claps again, this time more relaxed. Joy nods again, but she's still focused. So if you were on a set today and someone came to you and said, "This is too much," what would you do differently? Jared answers without pausing this time. I'd stop and listen first, he says. Not explain, not justify, just listen. That answer lands even more strongly than the last. There's a noticeable shift in the room, the tension giving way to something more reflective. Joy studies him for a second, then says, "That's important." A simple statement, but it carries weight. One of the co-hosts quickly adds, "And I think that's what people want to hear, right? That there's awareness." The audience responds with a round of applause. Jared nods. There is. For a brief moment, it feels like the storm has passed. But live TV doesn't just end there. Another host jumps in, smiling. Okay, before we run out of time, we should actually talk about the movie. The audience laughs, louder this time, a release of all the tension that's been building. Jared laughs too, shaking his head slightly. That would be nice. Joy even lets out a small chuckle. Yeah, let's do that. And just like that, the conversation shifts, still real, still layered, but no longer confrontational. They talk about the film, the role, the preparation, this time with a different tone. More balanced, less defensive. But the earlier exchange hasn't disappeared. You can feel it in the way the audience listens more closely now, in the way the hosts choose their words more carefully. Even when the segment wraps up, there's a different kind of applause, louder, more engaged. Thank you, Jared, one of the hosts says. This was a conversation. The audience laughs and claps. Jared stands, nodding to the panel. Thank you for having me. Joy gives him a small nod. Thanks for answering. It's not overly warm, but it's respectful. As Jared walks off stage, the camera lingers for just a second longer than usual, catching the hosts exchanging quick glances. Then the show cuts to a brief transition. But the moment doesn't end there. Because within minutes of the segment airing, clips start circulating online. Viewers begin reacting in real time. Some are praising Joy Behar for asking the tough questions. She didn't let him dodge anything. One comment reads. Others defend Jared Leto. He stayed calm the whole time. That's not easy under pressure. Clips of their exchanges, especially the sharper moments, start gaining traction. The lines get quoted, debated, dissected. Intention isn't the same as impact. I'm asking for fairness. Do you think you've ever crossed a line? Each one becomes a talking point. By the end of the day, the segment is trending across multiple platforms. Media outlets begin picking it up, framing it as one of the most intense interviews on The View in recent memory. Backstage, sources later say the atmosphere was noticeably quieter than usual after the show. Not hostile, just reflective. The hosts reportedly continued discussing the conversation off-air, while Jared had a brief, calm exchange with producers before leaving. No dramatic walkouts. No shouting behind the scenes. Just the kind of aftermath that follows a real, unscripted moment. And that's what keeps people talking. Because it didn't feel staged. It didn't feel forced. It felt like what live television is supposed to be. Unpredictable, uncomfortable at times, but honest. And that's exactly why audiences couldn't look away. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Joy Behar pushed too hard? Or asked the right questions? Did Jared Leto handle the situation well? Or avoid giving direct answers? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.